Windows Phone 8 has finally made it to the nation's third largest wireless carrier, and as you would expect, we're doing a dogfight battle between the two Windows Phone 8 contenders to see which one comes out on top. I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com, and it's a dogfight battle between the ATIV Neo and the HTC 8XT. Let's put them together and see which one comes out on top. If you like Windows Phone and to date you've been on Sprint and been frustrated with their lack of Windows phones, you're in luck right now because the nation's third largest carrier has two new Sprint Windows Phone devices at that are available right now. The Samsung ATIV Neo is available for $150 and the HTC 8XT is available for $99.99, both with a 2-year agreement. Now, both of these bring interesting things to the table. There are also pros and cons to both of these devices, and that is why we're doing a dogfight battle to figure out which one of these is the overall best bang for the buck. Before I get too far into that, special thanks to our partners at Best Buy Mobile for giving us devices like the ATIV Neo and like the 8XT that we give to you for free at PhoneDog.com. When you walk into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working, so regardless of which phone you get, they'll make sure your email, your web, your contacts are set up, they're unbiased, and thanks to them, you will walk out working with your new device this weekend. So let's do a quick spec rundown here of both of these devices and talk about how they compare to each other. The ATIV Neo and the 8XT both pack 1.4 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon 400 CPUs. The ATIV Neo has a 4.8-inch 720p HD display here, so a nice big display that's reminiscent of the Galaxy S3, and size-wise, nice. Pixel-wise, 720 by 1280 pixels. Over here, 4.3 inches, so a little bit on the smaller side, and you can see that when they're side by side like this. 4.3 inches, 480 by 800 pixels, so not an HD display over here. You do get 16.7 million colors, though, LCD display over on this device. 2,000 milliamp hour removable battery over here, 1,800 milliamp hour non-removable battery over on the HTC 8XT. Both have 1 gigabyte of RAM. This has 16 gigabytes of internal storage with a micro SD card. This has 8 gigabytes of RAM, storage with no micro SD card slot. So you are locked to this. If you get this, you better be okay with 8 gigabytes because that's all you get. Over here, 16 gigabytes, still small in comparison to the 32 and 64 gigabyte options on the table, but you do have that micro SD card slot behind the battery cover. Both have 4G LTE connectivity and both have 8 megapixel cameras, both with 1080p HD video recording capabilities. Where the 8XT wins, a couple of different areas. It has Beats audio integration and has boom sound integration out of the box, which is something we've seen on the HTC One. So if you like that feature on the One, but for whatever reason you're not an Android fan, it's maybe a device for you that you should look at, or that's worth looking at rather. Over on this side, very similar to typical design language we see from Samsung and most of their Android products. You've got power button and camera shortcut button on the right spine, micro USB charging port down here at the bottom, volume rocker over on the left spine, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack up top, and then of course your camera speakerphone on the back with Windows Phone logo and Samsung logo as well. You'll notice on both of these devices, neither one lists Sprint as a carrier. They are unbranded, at least from a carrier standpoint. Just the OEM logos are all you'll see on these devices. Over here, nothing on the left spine. You can see it's a two-tone, kind of like an 8S. Imagine the 8S and the 8X got together to have a baby. This is the 8XT, and it looks just like a merge between those two devices. Very similar in a lot of different ways. The two-tone color here between the blues. You've got the HTC logo on the back, Beats audio on the back, 8 megapixel camera. Over here on this side though, volume rocker, and then you got your camera shortcut button over here. Power button is up top, along with a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, as you can see right there, and then micro USB charging port off center to the right over on the 8XT. So both are running Windows Phone 8, and Microsoft's allowed for some select customizations with their carrier or with their OEM partners, I should say, and you can see that on both of these devices. So just taking a quick look to see what comes out of the box on both units, you got the usual Microsoft Windows Phone 8 stuff, but over here you got a ATIV Beam. And we'll talk about some of the ones that I've installed a little bit later or in part 2. Data sense over on this device, you have the typical Microsoft stuff with games and music and videos. Then you have Internet Explorer as you'd expect. Some of the Samsung applications include Live Wallpaper, Manga Camera, Mini Diary. You have Now, which is a Samsung application. And then scrolling down, Photo Editor, Samsung Link, and jumping back into the Sprint applications, you have Scout, you have Sprint Music Plus, Sprint TV and Movies, Video Trimmer, and more. Over here you have the typical stuff, Converter, Flashlight, both of which are HTC applications, the usual Microsoft suspects. You've got HTC, HTC Burst, HTC Camera, you've got Make More Space, Photo Enhancer, and then the Sprint stuff, Scout, Music Plus, TV and Movies. And you got Visual Voicemail on both of these devices, Wallet on both of these devices, and then Store, of course, is part of the Microsoft Store. So design-wise in the front as well, you'll notice some differences. On the Samsung device, you've got two capacitive buttons down here, back and your Bing button, and then you got a physical home button over here. All three buttons are capacitive, back, home, and Bing all in one. So designs a little bit different here. Both of these designs are very reminiscent of their respective OEMs. This looks a lot like a Samsung device. This looks a lot like an HTC device. If I were to put tape over the OEM logos, I'm sure you could figure out exactly who makes which device. So we'll dive in here and take a look at the software. And you can see I've installed some stuff on both of these devices, but I want to show you just in comparison the Now application on Samsung. These are all value adds that you get on these devices versus the HTC ad, or application rather, over on the 8XT. Now, like I said, these OEMs are working hard to differentiate their devices and their respective product lineups, and then amongst others. So for example, Samsung wants this ATIV device to be different and better than the HTC 8XT. HTC wants to differentiate its device from Samsung products, not just Android, but also on the Windows Phone 8 scale. And needless to say, Nokia, with their Here applications and with their ecosystem, they're looking to distinguish themselves as the head Windows Phone 8 device manufacturer. So you can see that here with device or with applications like this. For example, you can see Samsung's Now here, and basically they do the same thing. This gives you weather, this gives you news, this gives you stocks, weather, stocks, and news. But one's HTC, and you can see when I click on Dallas, for example, you can see animations here very similar to what you would see on an HTC Android device. Again, very similar over here. You've got a currency application in Samsung Now, and you get a lot of different Samsung goodies out of the box here. One of my personal favorites, ATIV Beam, because a lot of people have those Galaxy S3s and Galaxy S4s. With the ATIV Beam, you can jump in here, and Microsoft has a tap to send feature, which I'm just going to load up over here so you can see in comparison. Tap and send, for example, is turned on, so I can do NFC sharing between these two devices, for example, because they're both Windows Phone 8 devices. But what about the legions of people that have Samsung Galaxy S4s? Well, with the ATIV Beam, you can come in here and not just sync up with Windows Phone 8 devices, but also with Samsung Android devices, for example, like the Galaxy S4 that do S-Beam. So pictures, documents, music, and videos, tap them back to back, and you can take advantage of sharing documents on the fly or pictures on the fly. So that's a nice thing, and again, that's really playing up that Samsung ecosystem, which at least on the Android side is tremendous, and they hope to use that over on the Windows Phone 8 side to their advantage as well. Now that I said that, let me talk about some other HTC applications that I like. HTC's camera applications we'll cover here in just a little bit, but also one thing I like about this device is this, and I'll show you, find it right here, Data Sense, which comes on both of these devices. Go ahead and say yes. We'll go ahead and say one time, we'll say just this, we'll say it's 5 gigabytes, and it resets on the 3rd of every month. This used to be a Verizon exclusive. The exclusivity period expired, and now it's available on the T-Mobile, the Sprint, and on the AT&T Windows phones. I think Data Sense is great, and it doesn't necessarily apply as much to Sprint phones because you have unlimited data. But for those people that really care about their data allotment, for example, you're on a tiered data plan, or you want to watch your son or daughter's data use just to see what they're doing or see how much data they're using in comparison to you, how much time they're spending on the phone. Data Sense is great here because you can put in when your plan resets every single month. You can put in how many gigabytes you have, and you can see how much you have left. And usage-wise, what's taking the use. So for example, app downloads here, 29 megabytes people, 1 megabyte versus 10. Internet Explorer is taking up quite a bit over here on the ATIV S Neo, so you can compare those and see which ones do the best. So let's take a look at keyboard here really quickly because I want to show you the differences here. We'll just do a quick keyboard test. And Stephanie Hammersmith is deeply concerned about this project. This was a test message thread I sent to myself. So you can see the keyboard's exactly the same here, and the icons down at the bottom very similar as well. And you can see this switch, and I can switch phone numbers if I have somebody with 2 phone numbers in the contact area. So for example, just sending it here, going down to text message, and you can see 4.8-inch display, 4.3-inch display. First of all, I need to highlight the fact, and you won't see this on camera as much, this is a gorgeous display. Even at 720p, this is a really impressive display for a Windows phone. I continue to be impressed with the overall colors. They look incredibly well on this device. Black is nice and black, and these greens, very crisp, very clear colors. You really see the difference here, particularly after working with a 720p or a 1080p HD display. You really see the difference coming back to a 480 by 800 pixel display. You really notice the difference, and you can almost kind of see it here in the camera. If you look closely at the keyboard, you can see the difference in the blacks between this 4.8-inch HD display and this 4.3-inch non-HD display. So we'll do a quick typing test. Is happy, and we'll say over here is happy. And you can see they're both relatively easy to type on. Now, overall performance here, 1.4 gigahertz dual-core CPUs on both of these devices, 1 gigabyte of RAM on both of these devices. So overall performance is about the same on both units. You're not really going to see any difference. That said, it's going to depend on what you want. If you want something a little bit more compact and you can deal with a non-HD display, this might be your unit. If you want that HD display and you want something size-wise that's very similar to a Galaxy S3, for example, the ATIV S Neo may be your device. Stay tuned for part 2. We'll pick up where we left off and talk more about the software benefits, because Windows Phone 8 is very similar in a lot of ways. I want to see how these differ from each other. We're going to pick that up in part 2, and we'll talk about speed tests, and we'll wrap it out with the camera. Stay tuned for part 2.